So this conversation is going to be a reflection on an interview between Richard Sylvester, radical non-duality communicator, and Tim Freke on the role of interpretation in non-dual ultimate truth. We're going to be talking about how coming to recognize the role of interpretation in self-negating experience can help people who feel stuck in the belief as well as the experience of the non-existence of self, for example, and some of the implications of the inability to recognize the role of interpretation in what is called ultimate truth, supposedly based on the direct experience of unquestionable truths about the nature of reality.
So the thing that's changed for me is that I think that experience was really important for me. It was very interesting. But what is notable looking back is that it came with an interpretation which I had got from Nisargadatta and then from the other non-dual teachers I was exploring with. And what's happened to me over the last 10 years, maybe a bit more, is that I've come to a lot of ideas have turned around. So now when I look at the experience, I still see it as important. I still see it as interesting, but I don't see it. I don't understand it in the way that I did. And that's been a major shift. That's been fundamental. There's been a shift in my understanding of what you could call epistemology, how we know things, from this idea that you just know, rather than it's kind of that somehow there's a direct knowing, which is not to do with ideas, and that therefore non-dual experiences are self-validating. They are, you don't need to interpret them. They interpret themselves, all of which now I think is epistemologically naive. And that's led to a reevaluation of how we understand identity and the nature of what we mean by things like the self. I saw it like this, and now that doesn't seem good enough anymore. And now I see it like this, and it feels a lot, if it not feels, it just is for me an awful lot better and more coherent.
I don't know if you want to, or I could say what you do and who you are.
I have a YouTube channel in German where I talk about my bad experiences with non-duality.
Yeah.
I make different kind of videos. Sometimes it's very personal and I just vent about things that happened, and sometimes I make videos with more research and a little more neutral, but I try to inform about the difficult experiences with non-duality.
Yeah. So I think maybe something for people to hear is that, yes, all of your videos are in German. So whether it's somebody who German is their first language, and even if people know somebody maybe who's struggling, who speaks German, that you would be a great resource for them.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk again because I felt like we had a good start in our conversation about the video, and there were a few things I want to talk about more.
Okay.
We focused on like the suicide stuff that's really important. And then I thought we could talk a little bit more about the role of interpretation. You said what stood out to you the most was how Tim was trying to get Richard to reflect on the potential influence of interpretation on this kind of awakening to the self as an illusion and the world being just a dream, and that Richard doesn't really exist. I wanted to ask you like more about why that, like the whole this whole kind of realization that you and I have been talking about, that we have discovered that there's a bigger role of interpretation, and that this is not the ultimate truth, but it's one way of perceiving the truth that they talk about as it being the ultimate unquestionable truth, that it's self-evident. And then it was like so cool to see, I think probably the first time maybe that it's ever happened, but that I've ever seen somebody like challenge a radical non-dualist to ask them to say, is it possible? Can you see that there's a whole like influence of first someone telling you that it's the truth and then saying, hey, if you perceive things in this way or look at your experience in this way, then you're going to have the direct realization of this ultimate truth. And yeah, I just want to ask you if you want to share more about like why that's been meaningful for you to start to question or see more of that role of interpretation, like how that's affected you in your process of moving away from Neo-Advaita.
It was super important for me. I think it was the most important thing to realize this. And it took many years for me to really see it. And I'm still trying to see it really. I think I still don't fully. I'm still working on fully realizing that it's an interpretation or some way of seeing things.
Yeah.
But I think it's really simple. It's because you believed in it for so long, and so people told you this is the truth, and when you experience it, it will be the confirmation. I really don't think there's much more to it, why people get stuck in this thinking. Yeah.
So it helped you get unstuck.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it took a long time because I believed in it for so long and it made sense somehow.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that when I experience something that will make it true,
Yeah,
was so convincing. Today, I don't understand anymore, but it really was.
yeah. It feels disillusioning, I think. We talk about disillusionment in non-duality, the disillusionment of the death of all your illusions of the self and the world being real. But this is a different disillusionment in that whole, yeah, that whole truth approach, that it's like it feels now there's this like feedback loop. Like what if the whole sort of all the teachings before you start to have these like shifts or experiences that confirm that you don't exist? What if it was framed as, so there's a way of perceiving reality where you experience the self as an illusion. And it wasn't necessarily said that it's the ultimate unquestionable truth, but it was like when you perceive reality this way, you can experience, let's say, like the end of suffering. Whether that's true or not, it's a different story. But I think a lot about how different that would be and how it would make it a lot easier for people to move away from it when it is damaging them to experience reality this way. My understanding now is that one of the biggest reasons why people struggle to move away and get out of what can feel like a trap of I don't exist is the fact that it's been told to them that it's the ultimate truth. And if they don't believe it anymore, if they don't experience that as true, and they move away from it, that they are abandoning the truth.
Yeah.
And therefore they feel guilt and they feel shame and they feel this like paralyzing doubt. Is that also, how much do you see that being what makes people stuck?
Yeah, a lot for me too. So I think it's very common.
Yeah.
I don't know, you talk to many people. I think all of them say this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's the part that's like the experiences, let's say, where people say, now that I believe and I experience the self as just an illusion and just a story, and the world's just this appearance, this apparent dream, and all of that, that I experience utter nihilism and I can't enjoy the things I used to enjoy, and I can't meaningfully engage in relationships in the world. And then you also experienced, and I did eventually, the disassociation and dysfunctional types of derealization. that
Mm.
there's that, and it's really hard to get out of that, but there's another layer of it that's based on like the belief system and feeling like you can't see reality differently, or it just seems to be the truth. So how can I get out of this if that's the real way that it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's the way it felt for me. And for me, it was like, I think I just experienced DPDR. I don't know if I ever experienced this kind of enlightenment you did. I don't know.
I don't say enlightenment. I experienced what people in these movements describe as what you're supposed to feel, and the freedom from suffering.
I'm not sure if I ever experienced that in this way, but for me, DPDR felt like the same thing they were talking about. All these descriptions of you don't, it felt like I didn't exist anymore,
Yeah.
but in a really bad way.
When you say DPDR, you're talking about depersonalization and derealization, right?
Yes, yes. I try to keep it short, but I thought, okay, somehow because it fits this descriptions, this has to be some kind of enlightenment, and maybe just my ego doesn't want this, so I have to somehow let go of the rest of my ego or stuff
You're
like this.
resisting it.
Yeah,
They tell you
yeah.
like,
Yeah, but it felt impossible for the first month to question whether this is true or not. It was absolutely clear that this has to be true, and this has to be the thing they were talking about,
yeah,
just that something inside of me couldn't accept it or
yeah,
couldn't deal with the truth.
right. You and I were talking about is a lot of this shift really dissociation, and a lot of times people will say, no, it's not, it's different. I feel, and what you're saying is what we've talked about is, yeah, it's a type of disassociation, and a lot of people can experience it in a positive way, whereas usually when people talk about depersonalization in like the clinical way, it comes with a negative experience of it. So it was like it sounds like you felt like you were having that experience, but you weren't enjoying it in the way
Yeah.
that other people were. So I thought also in talking about the video with Richard, that maybe we could talk about how there's something hopeful in this, in seeing the way that Tim challenged him, and that Tim was also somebody who used to believe that the self is just a dream character and the world is just this illusion inside of you, and he really felt like all of the kind of those self-negating non-dual perspectives were the truth. And now he's come to a point of saying, you know what, I think that we're interpreting these valid experiences in the wrong way. And he believes it's the wrong way, but also will say, I would say also that we don't know if it is or isn't the ultimate truth, but it feels like it's that there's other ways to interpret it that feel more true, and also that just are better for us and for society and for our psyche and for like evolution. But that it feels to me like the great, amazing, positive thing that's come for me, and it sounds like for you and other people too, is to hear that, okay, this whole thing is dogma about there being one way to interpret reality that is unquestionable, but that it can free us to have other perspectives and new experiences, and free us to experience reality in a new way, and whatever that new way might be. But in this case, to experience the self as actually a real part of reality, and that the world isn't just a dream. But I feel like so many people are lost in that hopelessness that, like you said, okay, well, I'm seeing the truth now and I actually don't like it or it's harming me, but I'm stuck now because this is the way it is. And now I see that it's true. So I don't know. I just feel like I think that talking about this can actually be like really empowering for people that feel stuck.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's really important to talk about interpretation
Yeah.
and that this is a possibility. Just to see that it is a possibility can be really helpful.
Yes. Yes. It feels like one of the first steps in people loosening the grip of the sense that nothing is real and that they're not real is just to even say, is it possible that this is one way of perceiving reality that isn't necessarily the ultimate truth? And it seems
Yeah.
once you can even say, okay, maybe, yeah, that there it opens a bit of a doorway to seeing things in another way.
Yeah. I think this was also the one of the first very helpful things Dr. Britton said to me.
Who is she?
Because huh?
You want to say who she is if people are listening to this? Like, who is Dr. Britton?
Yeah, maybe you can describe it for
Okay.
me.
So Willoughby Britton, she's the I think at least one of the founders of the Cheetah House. It's an organization. They describe it as for meditators in distress, but they do lots of research into the adverse effects of meditation and contemplative practices, and a lot of it's focused on adverse effects of like losing your sense of self and sense of embodiment and all of that. She supports a lot of people that are dealing with adverse effects of that.
I was so obsessed with evidence. I thought I had to find some kind of evidence against these teachings. It was like when I don't find this evidence, I will never be free of it because I will never be sure if it is the ultimate truth.
Yeah,
And somehow she tried to convince me that, yeah, you cannot prove this, but you cannot prove the other side
exactly.
too.
Right.
So maybe you have to decide if you want it to be true because you will never know.
Yeah, that's a good point. That was something big for me too. And sometimes I hear from people where they're like, I don't really care if the truth is that the self is non-existent. I don't want to experience life that way. So I'm going to choose a different perspective that makes life more worth living and allows me to engage in society and all that stuff. What do you
That's
think?
great when you can do this. I was not
Exactly.
able to do this.
It's
So,
hard, yeah. And also to say, for me, was the whole element of like choice, like choosing the perspectives and even like your belief system based on like the qualities that it leads to, rather than is it the ultimate truth or not. What I was going to say was when you were saying like, trying to find how hard it was to try to find evidence for these self-negating views being the truth, and just remembering the big part of this is that you've been indoctrinated to believe that if you question it, it's just more proof of your ego.
yeah,
So you're really stuck because now if the mind is questioning it, there's just more evidence that you're resisting it and the mind can't touch this. And now we're seeing that like even this notion of like direct experience doesn't prove that something's the ultimate truth. Like you're having that experience of what someone's already told you has to be the ultimate truth. It's not necessarily something we just had on our own. It comes from this whole thousands of years of tradition that has enshrined it as the ultimate unquestionable. But that's also what makes it like some of the biggest cult dynamics, I think,
yeah, I
is
think this too.
that you're taught that you can't question what's being told to you. And if you do question it, then you're asleep, and it's the whole thing of it's ignorance. And I thought maybe it's also important to say that something that helped me was recognizing Neo-Advaita and all that stuff says that it's spiritual but not religious, right? And that made it really attractive because I, of course,
Yeah.
would never see myself as somebody who's going to be part of a new religion. And what we are so like moving away from is like the dogma and authoritarianism of like traditional religion, but starting to realize like how loaded it is with the very same religious components. It just gives this illusion of not having them because just spiritual authoritarianism and dogma about ultimate truth and it being unquestionable. And if you question it, you're ignorant or you're doomed to suffer or like to be in sin or ignorance or whatever. Like that's just textbook religious dogma elements. So that's helpful because then I'm like, I don't value that. I don't value dogma. I don't think that's a good thing. So if that's part of this whole paradigm that I've taken on, then this feels like a good direction for me to move out of that.
Mm. Yeah, it was also helpful for me to see that it's not so different from some, I don't know, Christian beliefs. I was never Christian, but I think it's the same when you believe in Jesus.
Mhm.
And all you do the whole day is to tell yourself about Jesus and that you want to experience Jesus and that you want to know that he is real and stuff like this. And at some point, you will experience it. And then it will be your proof that this is true. It's
Yeah,
the same thing.
I think so too. And I think that a lot of the non-dualists would say, yeah, but this is different because it's more about experience. But a lot of times in, let's say, Christianity, they would talk about experiencing like an awakening to God's love or to being held in this presence of, they just call it Jesus rather than like true nature or whatever it is. But then that other part of it being very similar to it's about like the truth setting you free. And it's the
Mm.
same thing as like salvation. It's like the only way you can be saved from whatever it is, your sinfulness or saved from your suffering is to wake up to the truth of whether it's Jesus or it's pure consciousness and your true nature. If you don't accept this one solution to suffering, then you're damned. It's like damnation. Non-duality doesn't talk about damnation, but they definitely damn you in words like you're doomed. You'll never be able to live a life without suffering or without ignorance if you don't see this, you don't accept it, you don't surrender to it, whatever.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, why do you think in the conversation with Richard Sylvester, we saw that he was very resistant and not open to questioning whether his beliefs and way of experiencing Richard as non-existent and the world is just a dream. Why do you think that people become so attached to it being the ultimate truth and resistant to questioning it or seeing the role of interpretation? What's your perspective on that? Why is it, like you said, he couldn't for a second even accept that maybe there's a role of interpretation? Why do you think that he was so resistant to that?
For me, it was so hard to let go of this idea that this is the truth.
Yeah.
It's just the same, just that he didn't make a bad experience.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't forced to question it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think if it's only positive for you, then you stick to this.
Oh, go ahead.
And also, if you spend many, many years in this mindset,
Yeah.
and then you try to question it, your whole concept of reality will collapse.
Yeah.
So I think it's also some kind of protection.
That's what I think is a big part of it to look at is like that investment in this being
Yeah.
the truth. Because on one hand, when you're a a neo-Advaita or a non-dual teacher or communicator or whatever. You've been standing there and writing there for decades, insisting that this is the one true way that it is and that you know the truth. And you would then have to have the humility, like someone like Tim, to come out and say, you know what, I was wrong. And actually, that may not be the truth.
I'm here going, oh, I was wrong, all those great books I wrote. And they're great books. Lucid Living is a great book. It just wish it wasn't wrong. It's a brilliant book, but it's just still wrong. It's really heartbreaking, really. And not just that, I have changed my views on some big things, massive changes over the last just few years. Astonished myself. But I hope, actually, this is my saving grace with it, it feels, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe having someone come out and going, hey, look, I've been wrong, allows everyone to go, oh, okay, maybe I'm wrong. And that's what we need, that ability to reflect. And maybe that'll be more of a gift.
It's very hard to have that humility. Then, as you said, your entire paradigm of reality crashing down around you. I also wanted to ask, I think, and that's tied to that, is that there's also the element of thinking that the ultimate truth is the certainty, and people were desperate for certainty. That's also why we go to religion and stuff, but such a big element, like as much as it seemed like neo-Advaita and non-duality was like embracing not knowing anything and everything being just a mystery, that, and even just that thinking you know things is just egoic. There's such a sense of having the ultimate certainty now. So you would have to step back into a sense of an open-ended sort of universe without having ultimate certainty. And that's obviously difficult too. But I think actually the other thing I wanted to ask you was like, how do you think it's related to like the suffering and salvation thing? Because it is really, this whole model is the truth will set you free. And if you're somebody like me and or Richard, who for a while experienced this shift into believing and seeing the self as non-existent was this sort of holy grail that offered us this relief from suffering, but it was so tied to this is the truth that has set us free. I wonder how much you feel like if you had to accept that it's maybe not the ultimate truth, does that somehow take away your sense of relief or that kind of thing?
Maybe. I don't know, because I didn't make this experience, but I think it's possible. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It does seem like this recognition that seeing the self or having an experience of your true nature being whatever it is, pure consciousness or just the ground of being, or just that it's an illusion or dream, whatever, that seeing that is just one perspective, or that there's a major role of interpretation and you were given all the pointers, and the self-inquiry sets you up to look for what they're already telling you to look for as the truth. And then it seems to confirm it.
At that time, I was teaching everything exists in consciousness. Life is like a dream. How would I get people there? What gets called pointing out exercises or guided meditation. What are those actually? They're really guided ways of imagining. Imagine it like this. Imagine it like that. Can you see it this way? And why this matters is because there's a whole sleight of hand, as if you're not doing that. As if literally all you're doing is going, look over there, see? And you're not. You're going, look over there with these ideas, see? This is my whole critique with Rupert Spira, when I realized that's what I've been doing all these years, that I was setting people up to see it in a certain way. And so they did. And when they did, they experienced it. And it was fucking mind-blowing, because it's possible to experience life that way. Didn't mean it was true. Just meant that's one of the ways you can experience it.
That can be a double-edged sword, because on one hand, it's good news for people who want to break out of that, but then it can be bad news for people that have that major investment in it being the truth. And for me, it was a little bit of both, because then my whole certainty about the way things was had to had to collapse again.
Yeah.
And to admit that I spent years basing this choice to lean into, let's say, for example, the self not being real or the world being an illusion. And I sacrificed, you sacrifice a lot for that too, because you sacrifice the richness of relationships and personhood and being an engaged participant in the world for that.
Mm.
But yeah, I still feel like ultimately it's a positive direction to move in.
Yeah, I think this too, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure that all people who are really stuck in non-duality and who don't want to leave it, you can talk to them endlessly about interpretations. They will not get it.
Because they think and they feel like I think I did, and maybe you did, that it's beyond interpretation.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But I think we failed to see that the interpretation, we started with an interpretation.
Yeah.
And that interpretation then dictated to us how we will even experience this, let's say, an experience where it feels like you open up to just this boundlessness with no perceiver, and also the whole no doer thing. Sense that it's all just happening and you're not doing the actions and there's no free will, that we had that pre-given interpretation, how that could influence the way you experience it, but of course the conclusion that you then draw from it afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's also so interesting that they ask these questions. Who are you? And it's like they try to encourage you to really look at this question. And when you are in it, you don't see that they give you the answers with the question.
I hadn't noticed. I hadn't noticed that I'd smuggled the very answer I wanted into the question.
It's not like you sit there for yourself and asking this question and come to your own conclusion. No, you come to the same conclusion they tell you.
Yes. Yeah, that's such a big part of it. Is it's supposed to be about self-realization and self-discovery, but there's only one discovery that you're allowed to come to. So it's not like this open-ended thing of let's see what I'm going to find and how I perceive it, but discover what someone's already told me is the truth of what I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still so surprising to me to have broken out of that. You said something that you wanted to share. Let me just read what you said. Is it okay if I read what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. You said when you watch satsangs, you always quickly notice that as soon as someone says that it feels different to them than from what the teacher says, the teacher pushes them to see it correctly.
Yeah.
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 And now you start to notice it all the time, right?
Yes.
And it's hidden from you when you're really you're really entranced by the whole thing, and it feels so mysterious and you want to get the truth and you feel like that person knows it, and now you look back at it and you're like, oh, there it is. They're telling you this pre-given, the ultimate truth that is their chosen interpretation.
Yeah.
Now you have to find it, and if you don't, you're wrong. No, I just didn't interpret it the same way as you, even if I had the same experience. But I think a lot of times they will say, well, you're not having the right experience. If you don't interpret it the same way, then you couldn't have been the non-dual experience.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah. They said it to me also. They always said, depersonalization is something different.
Yeah.
So you are not seeing the truth.
Right. It's I like focusing on that too, because like you and I talk a lot about how, like, for us, it seems it is a kind of depersonalization. You're experiencing yourself as unreal, and maybe that feels good to you, but it's still a kind of depersonalization.
Yeah.
And
I think it's interesting when you look into some, you call it forum also, for forum?
Forum?
Internet, yeah, yes, some internet forum where
Yeah.
people talk about depersonalization. And sometimes, not so often, but sometimes there are people who say, it feels great to me. I
Yeah.
like to feel this. I don't want to go back to normal. And all other people are like, I don't understand you. I
Yeah.
really would like to feel normal again. So even there are people who think this is great. So why? Maybe it's the same. Who
Yep.
knows?
Yeah. And sometimes I've even heard people will say to people who are experiencing like a type of when people are experiencing depersonalization in a way that feels just awful to them. I've heard whether it's somebody who's Buddhist or into any type of self-negating paradigm that will say the silver lining is that you're seeing the ultimate truth that enlightenment traditions that people have been striving to have throughout time. Congratulations. You're there. And I was actually thinking, I know hopefully it's not too triggering, but that book by Suzanne Segal
Siegel.
that
Yes.
I felt like I resonated with her a lot, that there's a lot of questioning of she was experiencing a kind of radical depersonalization, and then she went to seek ways of dealing with that. And she was told by non-dualists that what's actually happening is that you're seeing the truth, and this is whether it's enlightenment or whatever. But now I think we can look at it and be like, she found people who gave her a lens through which to interpret it. And she did come to the conclusion, I think, that she was seeing the ultimate truth. But now we can look at that too and be like, she was given a framework from which to interpret it.
Yeah. And you know that she questioned it 2 years later?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then she died. That's really sad.
From cancer.
Yes. Yes.
Very sad. Very
Yeah.
sad. I forget if there was something else I was going to say. Anyways, I feel like this is a very important conversation that hopefully will help people.
Yeah.
At one point, Richard, it seemed pretty clear that he had read Nisargadatta's stuff before he had his experience that Richard was just a dream character, which is the same with Tim that you and I talked about when people say they had a spontaneous realization that, yes, it happened seemingly all of a sudden, but in at least in most of the cases that I've even come across with pretty much every Neo-Advaita teacher that I was listening to, they had been absorbing non-dual teachings before what they described as a spontaneous awakening. So it does seem to apply in pretty much all of those cases.
Yeah.
Those are still valid experiences, and it doesn't have to take away if people are having positive effects from experiencing themselves as just an illusion. It doesn't deny that there can be positive effects from it at the same time that we can still say it's not the ultimate truth.
Mm.
Sometimes people will accuse you of you're just bitter or angry because you had a bad experience and that's why you're saying this. And it's no, actually, I had a lot of great experiences with it. It was profoundly positive at times, but I can still look back and with a new understanding say, I still think the conclusions I was drawing from it were not the ultimate truth.
Yeah. But maybe when this would be, when it would be normal, when all non-duality teachers would say, this is just one way of seeing things, and that's just one interpretation and not the truth. I don't know how many follower they would have.
That's a really good point, because that's one of the biggest draws to it, right? Is that you're going to be learning the ultimate truth. So I
Yeah.
think it would at least, what I think it would do is it would take away the incentive for people to come to it who are simply looking for the truth, but aren't necessarily trying to get away from suffering. And it would keep still a lot of people that are looking for unconventional ways to end their suffering.
Mm.
It might even still deter some of those people, because part of what draws it is that the truth is going to set me free.
Yeah.
That's a good point. But I
Yeah.
think you and I have said that it seems like, at least with radical non-duality that Richard communicates, it does feel like radical non-duality draws in probably the highest percentage of people that really are just looking for a way out of unbearable suffering.
Yeah, I think in all kinds of, I don't know, radical non-duality, normal non-duality, I don't know where to draw the line.
Yeah.
I think everywhere are so many people who just suffer so much.
Yeah.
If you listen to all these questions the people tell in the meetings,
Yep.
you see how much suffering there is, and that
Yeah.
they just want to be free from it.
Right. That's why our other talk was a lot about the suicide stuff. And yeah, so I think what I would say with the radical non-duality, why it's so appealing to those who are suffering the most, is because it's the most of the instant enlightenment and instant ego death, because it cuts out, you don't need to meditate, you don't need to do any practices. It's just realize immediately that the prison that you're in, it's that prison break thing, that it's like, it was just realize that this character and all your suffering is just a story, and in an instant the whole thing will unravel and you'll be free. So it's baiting you with this thing of, this is not going to be a path, it's a pathless path, and it's going to happen instantaneously.
Yeah.
And of course, because there's also so much of that talk about dying, and Richard's book, I Hope You Die Soon, and there's all these sort of cynical metaphors and jokes about like double barrel non-duality, and so much about violence towards the self.
Yeah.
Killing yourself in order to be free.
Yeah.
And if you're okay with it, there's one more clip I was going to play if you have a few more minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let's get down to it. There's one that's interesting where Richard goes into where he thinks he's not making any interpretations. You were saying he can't for a second, he can't recognize the extent to which he is making an interpretation. Let's do this.
You're choosing to name what I'm saying an interpretation, which you're perfectly entitled to say. I am labeling it a description, and I feel like I'm going out of my way not to interpret it.
So what do you think about that?
It's so weird, because on one hand, it sounds somehow logical to say it's not an interpretation, it's a description. But at the same time, it feels wrong, because it isn't just a description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what he said is actually like the crux of the issue, is that he thinks that because it's a description, he's saying what I'm saying is a description of reality and not an interpretation. So he's not even recognizing, because he thinks that what he's discovered and experienced reflects the ultimate truth, he sees that as a description and not an interpretation, because he doesn't accept that we're drawing conclusions that could be different from person to person, and none of which may actually be the ultimate truth. There seems to be a pretty big blind spot that whenever he's saying that, even that what happened for me was I saw the truth that there is no such thing as an individual or a person, that even that right there is an interpretation.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as an individual. That's an interpretation. It's a belief. It may be based on a direct experience, but it's still a belief. So yeah, it's fascinating to see that, to see it in action with someone saying it, because that's pretty much what we hear all the time.
Yeah. That's interesting. And it's also interesting that I still sometimes have this issue to really see what's going on.
It's very confusing, and it's very convincing too, that
Yeah.
it's, especially having come out of it and buying into it so much. But I remember
Yeah.
you were saying, and we get it all the time, where people will respond to our videos and be like, it's beyond beliefs. And I feel like you can have experiences where you're not actively, consciously saying to yourself in your head a belief, I'm not a person, I'm not a person, and you're just having an experience where there's no active thoughts. But then the moment that you say, I'm not a person, you're sharing a belief.
Yeah.
So they're still tied in. And like we're saying this whole time, all the beliefs were programmed into you before the experience. And so it's so hidden in that whole paradigm in non-duality, neo-Advaita, where you're stripped of all your current beliefs. The first step is destroying everything you thought was true, and then you're fed everything that supposedly is the truth.
Yeah.
So you take on all of those beliefs, then you have an experience, then you come back to thinking and you believe those beliefs are the truth, and then start sharing them. Anything else you want to say?
No, I don't think so.
I feel like we got a lot deeper than the first conversation.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I value you.
Thank you. That's such a compliment.